Dragon Rampage is a dice game with a fantasy theme. The characters control fantasy heroes that are traveling in a dungeon where there is this grumpy dragon that is not happy at all that the heroes are there to steal his treasure. What the heroes are trying to do is, well, several things at the same time actually. Sometimes the hero will try to attack the dragon and they will have to defend against the attacks of the dragon. Some of the times the heroes will try to grab treasure that has been left around the dungeon, and some of the times the heroes may just run for their life and try to reach the exit of the dungeon before the situation becomes too hot. And in different phases of the game, players will try to do different things from this list. They may try to concentrate on a specific thing, or they may switch from action to action as the dice allow. This is the general idea. Let me show you how the game works, and then I will share my impressions about the game with you. The game is played on this board where you have a dungeon track that represents the dungeon that the heroes are trying to exit. This is the exit of the dungeon in the longer game. This is the exit in the shorter game. Each player has a character that comes with a board with an illustration indicating the character, number of initial health points. If the health goes down to 0, the hero is dead. And then there are reminders here. These boards act as very good player aids, and there is an area on each character board where the player can place the specific deck of cards belonging to that character. Each character has a different one, and these cards usually indicate 2 powers that the card can be used for. One is a regular power, which is pretty good, it can be used for free, and one at the bottom is more powerful, but usually requires the expenditure of a certain amount of gold for you to be able to use that power. These powers may improve your attacks, may affect movement, may allow you to heal. They're just different effects, and therefore cards with different powers can be played in different parts of a turn. Each player also receives a token that is placed on that track to indicate the position of the hero in the dungeon, and then another series of numerical tokens with the illustration representing the hero. And these tokens are placed in these boxes here to indicate the amount of points that the player has earned in each specific category. Then you also have colored wooden cubes, a set for each player. One of these cubes is placed in this area for each wound that the hero inflicts on the dragon, so that you can also keep track of how many wounds each player inflicted just by looking at the color of the cubes there. And then each player receives at the beginning of the game a certain amount of gold. The gold is spent during the game, and then you can also earn gold through several types of procedures. Now, when it is your turn, you receive this set of dice here, which you can roll, and then you can re-roll dice up to twice. This icon here is the only one that cannot be re-rolled. It is locked away. The other dice, you can save some, and you can roll the other ones, then you can roll again. You can also choose to re-roll things that you had saved before. It is just that you cannot roll for more than a total of 3 times. Now I'm moving things out a little bit to show you what happens next. Once you have your final results, you place your tokens on these boxes here to indicate the amount of points that you have in each category. I have 2 dragon symbols, then I place a 2 there. Dragons actually are bad. It is the only category that is bad to have many points in. I have 1 green, which indicates defense, so I place my 1 there. I have 2 in attack, and then I place my 2 there, here in the attack category, and then 2 dice to indicate treasure, and then I place my other 2 here. Then the next player does the same, rolls all of the dice, re-rolls if necessary, and then places numerical tokens on the board here. If the other player has a higher number than you do in a certain category, then your token slides to the right, meaning that the higher numbers go to the left and they move the lower numbers to the right. In case that there is a tie, the number of the player that went earlier in a turn counts as higher. So turn order counts a lot in this game. It is very important. And the sliding mechanics also means that a token that was placed on a track early in a turn may end up being pushed out of the track later in the turn, and that means that that token simply is useless, because you need to have your tokens on these tracks to be able to gain the benefits that will be issued in the next phase of the turn. Once all players placed all of their numerical tokens on these tracks, then you move to the second part of the phase, in which you simply go through all of these phases, which are the same phases that you have here on the board. You simply resolve each track or each phase starting from top to bottom, and each phase has different things that will happen during that phase. Here are the phases and what happens in those phases. Defense: the player with the highest defense suffers no damage to dragon attacks and cannot be targeted by other players during the turn. Players cannot steal stuff from that card turn. The second highest value in that track heals 2 wounds, third highest 1 wound. Dragon Rampage: during this phase the players draw a card from this deck here. Each card represents 2 possible attacks from the dragon. If the total number of points on the dragon track is equal to this number of lower, then you implement this effect. If it is equal to this number of higher, then you implement this effect. The text tells you what hero or heroes will suffer damage, and this is the amount of damage that is suffered by that hero or heroes. After you have resolved that effect and inflicted that damage, then you also inflict the 2 wounds to the player with the highest Dragon Rage rating, but at least that player also draws a card, and then the second highest rating simply suffers 1 wound. Craftiness: the player with highest craftiness rating may steal gold equal to their craftiness rating from another player, or may draw a card. The second highest takes gold from the supply or draws a card. So you can take gold, but you do not damage another player, as it happens if you have the highest craftiness. Grab Treasure: highest treasure ratings draws 2 treasure cards and keeps 1. These are the treasure cards. Each treasure cards indicate a precious item that has some beneficial effect that you can use during the game by playing the card, and also treasures have a value in victory points, which you can score at the end of the game if you do not use the effect of the card. If you use the effect of the treasure, then you lose the victory points. And second highest just draws a treasure or 3 golds from supply, and second highest 3 gold. Attack the Dragon: during this phase, the players that have a token on the attack track roll the dice, and they may have rerolls granted to them by special cards or by their position on the track. The highest attack gets 2 rerolls, and the second highest 1 reroll. These symbols here count as successes against the dragon. With 4 or 5 of these, you inflict a wound on the dragon. With 6 or more, you inflict 2 wounds, and you can place 1 or 2 cubes on that specific area of the board, the area where you keep track of the wounds that the dragon has received. But if you roll dragon icons and you roll 3 of them, then your attack results in a wound to your hero. So this is pretty straightforward. This is how attacking the dragon works. And then you have the run your full dragon, full phase, during which this dice rolled, this movement die that has numbers from 1 to 3, highest rating rolls the run die and adds 1 to movement. Second highest just rolls the die, and third highest moves 1 space. And these spaces that you move on the board are these ones, the ones indicated on the dungeon track. and spaces may grant you different benefits when you land on that space. Here you may attack the dragon, here you receive a coin, here you receive gold, here you heal a wound, and here you can draw a treasure card. And you keep repeating this 2 phases, rolling and resolving effects, rolling and resolving effects, until one of 3 things happen. One of the players exits the dungeon, and then the game is over, or one of the characters is slain, or the dragon is killed. The dragon has a number of health points equal to 5 times the number of players. When the number of 1 cubes placed in this area is equal to the number of health points of the dragon is killed, and also the game is over. At that point, you score victory points, and the way in which points are scored changes depending on the way in which the game was over. For example, if you end the game because you exit the dungeon, then also the player that is the second closest to the exit of the dungeon will gain points. If the game is over because the dragon was killed, then the player that killed the dragon gains extra points, and the player that inflicted the second highest amount of wounds also gets points. If you end the game because your character died, then you receive a penalty. And there are some things that are always good. They always give you points. For example, treasure cards that you give for victory points, those are always good. Inflicting wounds, per se, you always receive a point per wound that is inflicted. But then there are bonuses and penalties that may be applied depending on the way in which the game is over. And that, of course, affects strategy greatly, because depending on how you see the situation develop on the board, you may try to manipulate the end of the game in order to maximize your gain and to inflict penalties on the opponents. This is not a game that I dislike, but it is not a game that I fell desperately in love with either. A concern to me is that the game really does not feel thematic at all. I've never had the impression that the game was about heroes moving in a dungeon. The dungeon is just that single abstract track, and you're just looking at the next resource that you may want to grab, and or the distance that you are at from the exit if you're trying to end the game that way. It felt very abstract. Same thing for the boxes that will grant you actions. Again, I didn't find it was about fighting for position or fighting for opportunity. I just found it was a matter of fighting for having higher numbers than your opponents and sliding their tokens and taking advantage of turn order, which again, these are all very abstract and gamey concepts in a way. Again, it's a dice game. I knew to start with that this was not going to be a full immersion into the theme, but at the same time there are dice games that I found much more thematic. Elder Sign and Dark Minions, for example, I found that they had a better delivery theme through dice mechanics. And there are things in this game that may not sit well with all groups. For example, the cutthroat element can be pretty intense, especially if you're playing with 5 players. We did play with 5 players, and I saw that some players sometimes would resent when some of the players were a little too aggressive in that. For the players, other groups, this is a plus. So I'm just saying that it may not work equally well with all players. Also with 5 players, sometimes the pacing seems to be a little off. Not that the turn in general takes too long, but sometimes what you do in a turn is very little as opposed to a lot of other players do. And then for you, that turn, things may feel very slow. You rolled the first time and you rolled a lot of dragon icons, you cannot re-roll them, then you're pretty much stuck with that, and maybe you rolled a single movement symbol. And then the other players start rolling and re-rolling, think about their strategy, decide to roll again, play a card, then they start resolving actions, somebody attacks, and again you have rolls and re-rolls, other players interfere with that, players grab treasures, and it's your turn, you're just sitting there, and then you move your hero by 1 space, and then next turn starts. Maybe next turn again you cannot do much. What I'm trying to say is that you're not granted a good number of actions and a good amount of interaction each turn. You may get that, and many times you will, but you will also have times in which the game will have lows and you will feel that you just sit there and you do not get to do much for a certain amount of time throughout the game. In my group, we have had players that were considering playing rounds of Flash Duel as they were waiting for their turn of Dragon Rampage to come around. But And it's just a game that, again, did not grab me. I enjoyed many things in it. I enjoyed, for example, the victory conditions, the change of victory conditions. That definitely is one of my favorite things in this game, because it gives you this tough decision between going for things that will always allow to score no matter how the game ends, or to go for higher paying but riskier things that may score a lot of points at the end, or they may backfire and not give you any points if the game ends in a way in which you did not expect the game to end. I don't want to damn Dragon Rampage with faint praise, but well, there are games that one doesn't love but one doesn't hate either, and they fall somewhere in between. And to me, this is what Dragon Rampage is, a game that I don't dislike, but it is not, you know, my top 5 games, a game that gets me excited when I get a chance to play it, that I'm looking forward to, you know, one day in advance. Oh, tomorrow we're gonna play this game. It is a game that I found entertaining as a dice game, especially played with not too many players, so that the game feels a little tighter, the pacing is better, and doesn't take too long. Then, as an entertaining dice game, I don't dislike it. It is a game that I could play if somebody has it and we decide to play it. I can be entertained by playing it. It's simply not a game that I would go out of my way in order to play.